Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Science is misogynist, math is racist, and anyone can be canceled for any reason at a moment's notice. Welcome to 2021. I have the latest example of this. A student at a private school said, "We don't call them Newton's laws of physics anymore. We call them the three fundamental laws of physics." And we do that in order to decenter whiteness. They're no longer called Newton's laws because Sir Isaac Newton, as you can see in this picture here, was white. That's where we're at, canceling Isaac Newton. Now, calling it Newton's laws, to be clear, it's not centering whiteness. It's centering the very specific human being who made this discoveries in the field of physics, right? It's centering Newton. It's not called the white man's laws of physics. It's the Newton laws of physics. There's no white physics or black physics. It's just physics. But you can see, and I hope we can all see this now, that when you have been trained to see the world through the lens of race and diversity, and everyone is only a member of a group, then of course you're going to classify Isaac Newton not as a brilliant scientist, or first and foremost as a theologian actually, but you're not going to classify him as a brilliant person. You're going to classify him as a white man. And that's it. Therefore, he's got to go. When in reality, we should be looking at Sir Isaac Newton and what he did and the discoveries he made as he's a representative of mankind. Like he's the brilliant human. What a shame. Now, what the people who do this, these woke people, what they don't understand is that if they keep this up, then Newton's third law is going to come back and bite them. Newton's third law is, we all know it, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you keep these racist games up, do not be shocked when people get racist. You're forcing white children to focus their identity on their whiteness. It's all day, it's drilled into our kids' head. You're white, you're white, you're white, you're white, you're white. And pretty soon these kids are gonna say, you know what, I am white. And I'm proud of my whiteness. White people are awesome. White power. And you do the same thing for black people. You say, you're black, you're black, you're black. Even Black Lives Matter, one of their tenets is to be unapologetically black. And you know, people like, after a while, people are gonna be like, yeah, I am black. Being black is awesome. Black power. Uh-oh. That's not good. We have worked very hard for the entirety of civilization to elevate ourselves beyond this primal desire to group ourselves based off of the most base and meaningless difference, the color of our skin. We've worked very hard to get to a point where we don't do that anymore. And now we're being pushed right back into it head first, full steam, led by a bunch of racists. Yet I'm saying, just don't do that, and I'm the racist. Try that one on. So lately we've been hard on public schools for very good reason. I stand by everything I've ever said about it. You should never, under any circumstance, send your kids to a public school. No one's ever given me a good reason why you should send your kid to a public school, by the way. The only reason that I've ever heard is because it's free. Free, still paying for it, but it's free. And it's just what we always do. Okay, but those aren't good reasons. So when I say don't send your kids to a public school, just note that sometimes private schools are even worse than the public schools when it comes to this woke stuff. Barry Weiss wrote an amazing article about this, and she was specifically focused on Harvard Westlake and a couple other private schools too, but Harvard Westlake in particular. Harvard Westlake is the most prestigious private school in Los Angeles. It's a cool $40,000 a year to go to this prep school. And she met with a bunch of parents who are concerned about how the school has gone full on anti-racist. You see the pamphlet they sent out there it's like 20 pages of how they're now anti-racist. On my radio show, we went through each and every page to talk about how it's infected the curriculum of every grade and every class and the whole thing, right? how they're decentering whiteness with Isaac Newton, for instance. This is one private school parent who was born in a communist country, just like we talked about yesterday. These people who were born and lived and raised in communist countries, they're coming over here. They came here for a reason, and they're coming here, and they're the ones who are the most alarmed. They're like, hello, everyone. I've seen this before. Doesn't end well. Here's what the parent said. I came to this country escaping the very same fear of retaliation that my own child feels. It's the fear of social shaming. If you published my name, it would ruin my life. People would attack me for even questioning the ideology. Another parent said the kids are scared of other kids. This is a common theme in communist and totalitarian countries. I'll never forget it. We've talked to a couple defectors from North Korea before. And the common theme from all these stories that I've heard of people living in communist countries and people I've talked to is you can't trust anyone. You can't trust anyone. The most important natural resource in a society, it's not oil, it's not coal, it's not gold, it's trust. If you can't trust each other, nothing works. And these totalitarian countries seed mistrust in each other. You're always looking after seeing who's breaking the rules, and then you always got to watch your back because people are watching you, even your own friends and family. And the kids are scared of other kids. One parent said that the atmosphere is making their kid anxious, paranoid, insecure, closed off from even their close friends. What is this? One mom's son begged her not to talk about what's going on at the school because if it gets out that it was him and their family, it would ruin him forever, he says. He'll never get into an Ivy League school. That's the worry. So what kind of woke stuff are we talking about? So this is one of the English teachers at Harvard Westlake in Los Angeles. This is how she welcomed students after summer break. I am a queer white woman. So notice that's with an X right there. It's very trans-inclusive woman of European descent. I use she, her pronouns, but also feel comfortable using they, them pronouns. And then she attached a self-care letter. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. On tomorrow's show, we're talking about the woke mob and cancel culture. And one of the points I want to make is that we used to have God at the center of our lives and center of our existence and center of our culture. We've removed him, so we have to fill it with something. And one of the things that we've filled it with is ourselves. We've centered ourselves, hence all the narcissism we see today, and hence this woman right here. Caring for myself is not self-indulgent, self-preservation, blah, 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 right? So your kid walks into that, right? I'm a queer woman, like one, as opposed to I'm just, Miss Johnson. Call me Miss Johnson. I'm your English teacher. One math teacher at a private school in New York City said he's surrounded by this cult and he's trying to help kids not become members of it. Here's what he said. He said, I studied critical theory. I saw Derrida speak when I was in college. That's who we talked with Gad Sad about Derrida yesterday. So when this ideology arrived at our school over the past few years, I recognized the language and I knew what it was, but it was in a mutated form. I started seeing what was happening to the kids, and that's what I couldn't take. They're being educated in resentment and fear. It's extremely dangerous. It teaches people who have so much to see themselves as victims. Again, it's $40,000 a year to go to this private school. The school that he goes to in LA or teaches at is, I think it's $56,000 a year. They think they're suffering oppression at one of the poshest schools in the country. One girl, like a middle school girl, came back from school one day, and she told her parents, all people with lighter skin don't treat people with darker skin, or don't like people with darker skin and are mean to them. That's the message to middle school kids. In class at these private schools, if you're white or male, you're never allowed to speak first. You're gonna need to redistribute the power. Harvard Westlake, their kids took an implicit bias test, which is the stupidest thing of all time. Have you ever taken the implicit bias test? Just Google it. Just Google implicit bias test, and you can take it yourself. It is the dumbest thing ever, but it is the scientific backing to all of this stuff. It's insane. So the kids took it, and one of the kids came home and said, Mom, I just found out I'm a racist, and I prefer white Europeans. And that student is mixed race, whatever mixed race even means, right? But still racist. The parents say they tried to talk to the teachers and they say, oh, you don't understand because your skin is white. Just to the depth of this and how it infiltrates everything, one history class had a unit on Beyonce. You heard that sentence, right? One history class had a unit on Beyonce for some reason. And the students couldn't even say that they didn't like her music. And the parents are thinking, hold on, you're not even entitled to your own music preference? What does it mean when you can't even tell the truth about how music affects you? So why does this continue? Why don't they really stand up against this? Right? Why would you continue to subject your kids to this? That's child abuse. That's why I say get out of the public schools. It's child abuse. So why are these parents still doing it? Because they want to be in the club. It's a $40,000 a year prep school. They want to get into an Ivy League school. They, the parents, if I may. Because on tomorrow's show, again, we're going to talk about the woke mob. And I'm going to talk about witch hunts. And there's 4 different groups of people involved with witch hunts. There's the very few people who hunt witches. Then there's the larger group of people who are like, yeah, let's go get them. Then there's an even larger group of people who remain silent. And then there's the group of witches. These parents, I guess, fall into the silent group. Right? They're staying silent about it. Yeah, they're speaking out anonymously about it, but they're not really doing much about it. Because they've been brainwashed themselves into thinking that this is the secret to happiness in life. Getting into an Ivy League school, making a lot of money. And they'll do anything to have their kids take that path. But I ask, what good is it for your kid to go to an Ivy League school if it means brainwashing them for 4 formative years in high school, only to get to the Ivy League school where you're going to be brainwashed for 4 more years? So you've just given your kids 8 years of Marxist indoctrination for what? A 6-figure salary upon graduation? Congratulations. That's the price? That's the price for your kid's soul? Why are you striving for that? One 4-year-old goes to a woke pre-K, came home, was drawing her family, and said to her mom, I need to draw in my own skin color. Skin color is really important. Martin Luther King Jr. would have said, you get your kid out of that school immediately. And here we are, parents paying $40,000, $50,000 a year. She said she learned that in school. Skin color is really important. Okay, I'm gonna take a break. So what do we unite around? What should we unite around instead of this? We see, and I know you understand where this diversity fetish will lead us. So what do we unite around instead? We need to be able to define that. We'll do it next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I hope for, I know for you, I hope for people, more people who don't watch this show and aren't, paying attention. I hope more people start to see where this division is going to take us. It's unbelievable that so many people are still falling for this. And it was, of course, started in the universities, but now it's trickling down. It's already trickled down into the private schools and of course, all the public schools. We're gonna do a segment on the radio today, and maybe we can bring it back next week on the TV here, about the new ethnic studies curriculum in California, where they're making kids chant to the Aztec gods. I'm not kidding. So that's like the perfect example of how it always will degenerate into paganism, right? And again, you remove God from the center, and then you put yourself at the center, but then it's not long before you just put pagan gods at the center. And they're literally doing that in the entire ethnic studies curriculum for the entire state of California. Okay, that's where this takes us. This division on our kids. It's insane. Math and science even. Of course, literature and stuff like that. But even math and science, no such thing as objective truth anymore. So instead of the division, what's the true story? What should we be uniting around? And I'm not making this up. This is what we've always united around. We used to have a consensus in America, as much as one could have a consensus with over 300 million Americans, right? But culturally, there was a belief that we were created in the image of God. And there were self-evident truths, as the Declaration said. It just means obvious. These are obvious, self-evident truths that there's a creator, and he endowed us with inalienable rights. Can't be given away, can't be taken away. And we are equal in the eyes of the law because of that creator and because of that endowment. That's a revolutionary thought, and that used to unite us. You're presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's a big one. We rejected mob justice. That's not a good thing. We believed that there was such thing as truth and that there were facts that mattered. We used to be united, and we could still be one day, united around the commitment to freedom of speech and freedom of thought. And you have all those things that united around, but still then, politics had its own place. It was in its own box. A big box, an important box, but there were other boxes. Art, music, family, friendship. As Justice Scalia said about his friend Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who they vehemently disagreed politically, he said some things are more important than votes. The deal is the woke cult today, the woke movement, it's not just a political movement, it's a philosophical movement. And it's infiltrated everything by design. There is no God, so politics has become our God. And where God used to be at the center of everything, now politics is at the center of everything. We're a country that's not united by blood or soil, but a commitment to shared ideas and values. Now, there's a small group of people who hate those values, a larger group of people who follow along with those haters, a larger group still who just stay silent entirely, and then a small group, you and me, who are living and proclaiming those values every day at an ever-increasing risk. The problem is today there's no such thing as truth. It doesn't exist. I will never forget this quote. This quote is gold. Smith College. Here's the quick backstory to it. Smith College is a small liberal arts school in Massachusetts. There was a black student there who was eating lunch in a dorm building's lounge. And a campus police officer came up and asked her what she was doing there and asked her to leave. And she freaked out, went on Facebook, talked about how the harassment she received, and in her quote, all I did was be black, right? She says it's outrageous that people question my being at Smith College and my existence overall as a woman of color, and just turned into this huge thing. And the president jumped to her defense. Oh, this painful incident reminds us of the ongoing legacy of slavery and blah, 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 just bowing, all right. Every media outlet jumped to her defense. The ACLU said she was profiled for eating while black. Whole thing, right? 3 months later, after an investigation, turns out the dorm building was closed for the summer, and the janitor there was told to notify security if anyone was in there unauthorized, which anyone would be unauthorized in there because it was closed, and the officer came up and politely asked her to leave. And he was unarmed. She said he had lethal force, but he was unarmed the whole time, okay? So that's the truth of what happened in that interaction. Completely harmless and legitimate, had nothing to do with race. But check out this sentence from the New York Times. This is perfect. That's the headline. Here's the sentence. The story highlights the tension between a student's deeply felt sense of personal truth and facts that are at odds with it. Every word of that is gold. So here it is. The story highlights the tensions between a student's deeply felt sense. Right? It's just a sense of it. It's a deeply felt sense of personal truth. And then you got these pesky facts over here that are at odds with it. And there's a tension there. This story has it all. Victimhood, self-centeredness, And there's no such thing as truth, only feelings, deeply felt senses. That's the culture we're living in today. Reject that. Stand up for truth. Truth exists, hence the name of the show, True Story. Final thought before we get to the guests of the hour. One of the most troubling aspects of our woke culture today is who will throw you under the bus. It's only a matter of time before you get thrown under the bus. It's only a matter of time before you get canceled or persecuted in some way. So get ready for that. This isn't getting better anytime soon. So readjust your like your limits, because we're just getting started. The latest canceling, this one was yesterday, we mentioned it in passing. There's a member of the band Mumford & Sons, and he read a book by Andy Ngo. Andy Ngo is a reporter who goes to these Antifa riots and reports on them right on the ground. And he wrote a book called Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. And the band member, so you see there, he read the book and he wrote, hey, congratulations, no, finally had time to read your important book, you're a brave man, boom, that's it. And a bunch of people on Twitter called him a fascist. And because they are petty little babies, intellectual babies, they demanded that he get kicked out of the band. And you're thinking, like, I don't even need to kick you out of the band, right? Can you imagine being on Twitter and be like, oh, this is outrageous. Yeah, I want you kicked out of the band. And you're like, well, you're not in the band. You can't just kick me out of the band. But he did. He got kicked out of the band. He apologized. I don't have it in front of me. You guys throw it up there? Whatever. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to take time to reflect, blah, blah, blah. So sorry for the people I hurt with my blah. What a rock star, right? People are moral cowards. That was the theme of the show yesterday. Moral cowards. Absolute moral cowards. You're telling me a couple of anonymous people on Twitter call you a fascist and a Nazi, and your own bandmates, and that's my real point here, right? Your own bandmates turn on you? So be prepared for that. Be prepared emotionally for not just being canceled, but your best friends, family members, people at your work who you got along with. Right? Remember we shared the story the other day of the New York Times writer who got fired for saying the N-word 3 years ago on that field trip in Peru, whatever. He said there was there's like a New York Times alumni Facebook page. And all these people who he used to work with decades ago were writing, oh yeah, no, he's super racist. And he's like, like we were like super friendly with each other. I don't know. Or it'd be like, we only talked like once a decade, you and I, but when you left, we were like super, like, I don't know what you're talking, what do you mean? You really think it's right, so people close to you at work will throw you another, people at your church will throw you under the bus. People close to you will lose their minds and destroy your life and make you miserable and act in terrible ways for the littlest slights. And that's really sad. Nothing's sacred. The mob is ruthless. And look what they made someone do. They made a fully grown man apologize for endorsing a book. So a note about apologizing. There is, of course, a time and a place and a way to be humble and thoughtful when you're confronted by a loved one about something you said or something you believe or support. There's no doubt about it. If someone, a family member, a dear friend comes to you and says, hey, listen, I saw this, or you said this, or it seems like you this, how do you feel about it? And you're like, oh, wow, like, you're right, like, I was wrong about that. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Like, there's a way to be humble and thoughtful and introspective when this is done by honest actors. But an anonymous mob, right? When an anonymous mob of bad actors come at you, don't apologize. You never apologize to them. Again, I want to be clear, because I know someone even just heard what I just said, and they're like, oh, Slater says you should never apologize. No. Honest people who love you and you love them and you're wrong, you apologize. You do something that's fine and an anonymous mob come at you, never apologize. You take the Charles Barkley approach. Okay, what's the Charles Barkley approach? Charles Barkley, this is like 2 years ago, he made a joke on the NBA pregame show. He made a joke about the big old women in San Antonio, right? Talked about the big old women in San Antonio who eat churros and who are on a new diet called Slim Slow. All right? Now, that's what he said. And then the anonymous mob came at him. I demand you to apologize to the big old women in San Antonio. And here's what he said.
Here's what I got to say. Turn off your damn television. I'm not going to change. If you don't like me or the show, turn it off. And they want me to apologize. That's not going to happen.
What they want you to apologize for?
Me joking about those big old women down in San Antonio. And so, listen, y'all can write letters to your mama, your daddy, your uncle. I'm gonna have fun on television. You know that I'm joking around, but if y'all waiting on me to apologize, hell gonna freeze.
Wait, what are you apologizing for?
There's no big old women down there.
Going on for 6 years.
And let me tell you, come on.
That's gonna be my response to the anonymous mom. You can write your letters to your mama and to your daddy, but I ain't apologizing to the woke mob. Coming up next, a controversial economic take. And it's one I agree with, but very few people do. And that is that price gouging is good. Hear me out. Talk about that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I'm very excited about this segment. So, I'm a free market guy. You probably are too. I've been making this argument for many, many years. And it is the hardest free market argument I think there is to either make or for people to accept, even, and in many cases, especially to conservatives. Like many conservatives reject this argument, and I'm really, really excited to talk about it here. So let's do this, right? This is a wonderful opportunity to exercise and practice keeping an open mind. Because we're on the same team here, right? We agree, right? We're on the same team. Even if we maybe disagree on this one particular topic, like let's practice coming into a thing like totally humble, completely open mind. Let's hear all the evidence and see how it goes. And my argument is that price gouging is good. Ooh. I can already feel you be like, oh, no, what? Price gouging is good. Let's hear the case for it. Rick Chakraborty is here. He's a professor at Christopher Newport University in Virginia. Rick, how are you, Professor?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you for inviting me over to your show. It's fantastic to be here.
My pleasure.
Morning to all your listeners.
So let's do this. Let's define it. What is price gouging?
Right. So can I first start by saying price gouging itself, this term price gouging, is itself a bit of a straw man. Inherent or embedded within that idea is there are these greedy, sleazy businessmen trying to wrangle you and squeeze out every ounce of your resources. That's what it sounds to me when I hear price gouging, right? Someone's trying to gouge you. Someone's trying to take advantage of you. But really what we're talking about is disaster-induced price surges. And what we are observing is any attempts to curb these disaster-induced price surges through artificial restrictions on prices, how high prices can go during disasters, have pretty rough, adverse, unintended consequences. So again, to quickly define the idea of price gouging would be there are prices that go up in the market, and that results really from the scarcity. Let me get this out right now. Prices reflect scarcity. Higher prices reflect increased scarcity. If I don't allow that to happen, if I don't allow prices to reflect scarcity, then I'm creating certain distortions that translates to weird incentives. So if I restrict the market to reflect the reality of prices going up, then I'm telling your buyers, so I see these prices on the screen right now. If I don't let those prices go up to those numbers, then I'm incentivizing my buyers to go into these markets and pile up every bottle of water they can find. And if I don't let the prices go up, then I'm effectively demotivating these sellers from replenishing their stocks, right? So in attempt to stabilize prices, I'm enforcing shortages to happen. This is not new, by the way. This is something that economists have been saying for ages, that price gouging laws restricting prices from playing out their natural role of reflecting scarcity creates shortages. What's new, though...
Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish that thought. What's new?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what's new, though, is we take that one step farther and show that if you create shortages through policy with a disaster, with an infectious pandemic looming in the background, you make people crowd into stores searching for good things, guess what happens to COVID transmissions?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so if toilet... Okay, let me try to articulate it, and I want to see if you think I'm on the right track. I've visualized, because this is such an important argument. It's really important argument. I envision it like a price is a signal. And a price sends a signal to consumers, buyers, as you put it, and suppliers. So a high price of a thing, toilet paper, for instance, sends a price to the consumer, hey, there's not a lot of these things. Buy sparingly or use accordingly. High price means there's not a lot, so don't hoard it. And a high price sends a signal to the suppliers of, hey, we need more toilet paper over here. There's a shortage, make more, ship more, send more, stock more, whatever. And if you stop that signal from that price from going up, that signal doesn't get sent, which leads to distortions. Is that an okay way to put it?
That's spot on. I couldn't have put it better myself.
And I love the point you made at the end about what's new, because if the price is low, stays low or normal, let's say toilet paper, you're right, people go and they hoard it, so there's less for people, less for more people. So like maybe one person has 1,000 rolls of toilet paper and 999 people have no toilet paper, as opposed to everyone having one roll, right? And then, but the other point you said is now everyone's in Costco fighting and spreading COVID while they're trying to hoard. Is that right?
Absolutely. So it's a basic 3-step process, right? Step 1, price gouging laws create shortages just because of the reasons you talked about. They distort the price signal. Step 2, these shortages lead to people searching around more for the things they're trying to find, store to store. And then step 3, with an infectious pandemic thrown in the background, guess what happens to COVID transmissions and deaths when many people flock to stores trying to find these essentials.
So good. I love thinking about unintended consequences. I love it. So here's my question. Why do so many people, do you think, reject the argument that we've just made here, that price gouging is good? And again, I like that you reject even the term price gouging, right? But why are people like, no, like we need these laws, even though I think you so articulately explained the problems and the unintended consequences? Why are people still reject this idea?
Right. You bring up a great point, right? And so just this other day, I was in class talking to my students about this research we've done, and someone just raised their hand and said, wait, so are you saying price gouging is good? And to that, I had to say, first of all, let's make sure we understand that this term price gouging needs to be qualified. We need to understand that term first, because otherwise, it itself, within that term, there's this loading, right? I'm loading you to thinking that there are these greedy businessmen trying to take advantage of your situation. And then I say, how can I morally support that? So it's almost a moral objection, and somewhat naive as well, because you're not thinking through the incentives of disallowing this mechanism. And I see this happen frequently. A lack of understanding about the economic way of appreciating the world is also a lack of recognizing the role incentives play, right? You're tempted to judge policies based on the announced objectives or the noble goals that drive them, rather than thinking through, wait a minute, what are the incentives going to be? How is that going to play out? And do I really want the world to look like that if I let these incentives play out?
Let me push back on one thing here. So the best rebuttal I've heard to this, is, beyond just the it's mean and the greedy businessman and all that thing, the best rebuttal I heard is, Slater, what we should do instead is ration. Whether it's rationing gas, or you go to the grocery store and you're only allowed to buy 2 dozen eggs instead of more. What's the problem with rationing things?
If you've been aware of the news, you've probably seen reports of people just almost circumventing the rationing idea by just making multiple trips to the same store, or going around in shopping sprees, right? So if you don't change the prices, you don't increase the cost for me to go and acquire these things. So if I can still find toilet paper at $2 a roll, I'm just making that number up, by going on multiple trips across these stores, then I'm going to hop around and get them as long as I can get them. So yes, my neighborhood store does not allow me to buy more than 2, but nothing stops me to going back there again later in the day, sending my wife to do the shopping again, or just hopping to many more stores. So again, rationing, yes, might be an okay idea. I don't know in other cases, but in the context of the pandemic, the problem we look at in this paper, it again creates the exact same problem, which is you're incentivizing people to flock in stores and look for other stuff. Now, let me now push back on the pushback for a second. One of the grocers, this blew my mind because it was just economics in action, Econ 101 in action, right? So one grocer in Denmark devised this brilliant idea. He said, okay, you want 1 bottle of hand sanitizer, you get it at the regular price. You want 2, I'm going to charge you double the price.
Yes.
And that's it. That's brilliant, because that makes the consumer incentivize or internalize the cost they're going to impose on everyone else, right? So 1 hand sanitizer taken away for me is 1 less for you. But if I have to pay that price, that extra price, then I'm having to internalize that cost I'm imposing on you. That's how markets function. That's how prices can pay these things.
And that doesn't hurt the 80-year-old person on fixed income who just needs 1 bottle of hand sanitizer that's not going to cost $1,000 and make them go broke. They can get the 1. Yeah, that's really good. Professor, we got to run. I apologize for cutting you off. But I love that ending. That's super important. Thanks for your research, Professor. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Let's keep spreading the good word to your students. Christopher, Newport University in Virginia. Rick Chakraborty. Coming up next, we'll talk about someone who was canceled. A little preview for our cancel culture special tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Tomorrow, our special is on cancel culture and the woke mob. I want to get a little preview with that with a host of the host of Ginormous Food on Food Network. He's also a member of Locals, as I am as well, and you can support him at joshdenny.locals.com and stand-up comedian. Mr. Denny, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Is it annoying in your life to be labeled as a stand-up comedian because now people expect you to be funny all the time everywhere you go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's annoying. That being labeled as a comedian isn't annoying, but that thing definitely is when people are like, "Tell me a joke," and that still happens. As hack as it is, people still do it all the time.
That's brutal. Like just to be walking around with the label of like funny guy. I'm here to make you laugh all the time. That being said, you did make me laugh a couple years ago, and you got fired for it with this tweet right here. It was International Women's Day the other day, and you just told everyone to stay safe on the roads. And that's, I mean, I'm not laughing. Don't cancel me. So what happened? What happened when you sent that?
Well, I saw some iterations of that the other day, like almost like more modernized versions of that joke. And I was like, that's funny. I made that joke 2 years ago and I lost a job over it. So I had my first brush with cancel culture in 2018, spring of 2018. And, things in the entertainment world really cooled off for me after that. And I had an old boss that I worked with in the corporate world for many years over several different companies who had taken a new position at a new company and hired me essentially to be his replacement as he took a bigger role inside the organization. And I had only been there for a couple days before I was brought into the office at HR. And, they had an entire... It was almost like a true crime lab where they had like all my tweets and all these different press articles about me pulled up on computers and printed out and laid across the desk. And they're like, "Is this you?" And I was like, yeah. I mean, I had a television show syndicated in 14 countries. It's kind of hard for me to, it's a different Josh Denny who looks like me, So, they did what they always do in those situations. They put me on suspension and then fired me when my final check came in that Wednesday. But essentially, a handful of women that worked at the company were offended by this joke that you posted and several others that were on Twitter. And, the idea of, hey, I've been a professional comedian for 14 years. None of this should be taken seriously. And by the way, when I've had corporate jobs, it's never bled into the workplace at all. That sort of logic just goes out the window, and people see red, they know they can take you down, and they do it. So
what's interesting, what's interesting, we were just talking about this. We played Charles Barkley, a clip of him when he was. People tried to get him to apologize, and he said like, "No, forget it." And we were talking off air about like, was anyone really offended? Right? Like, was a woman at your work really offended? What's really going on there?
No, I mean, my instinct, and granted, when you go through these, obviously I sued, and unfortunately a term of my employment was to sign an agreement for arbitration. So we went to closed arbitration. And through that process, though, much like any legal process, you go through depositions, you get their depositions from their people, you get transcripts. And I think ultimately my deduction, and this is just my intuition, is that one of the women who interviewed for the job that eventually was given to me, I don't think was happy she didn't get it. I also don't think the female director of HR was happy that they kind of hired me and created this position directly from the president and the VP of retail kind of without her blessing. And so, I think there was a lot of other things at play. And, the comedy was just an excuse for, we don't want this guy here.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I want to talk about comedy in general, and we only got 3 minutes. I hate to do that, but comedians have been very worried for a long time about lack of freedom of speech, even in comedy. What's the importance of comedy in this culture we're living in today? Why is it? I think it's the most important thing. Why?
Well, I think it's sort of you've heard this cliche thing. It's the last bastion of free speech. And using absurdity, I think, is the only way you can bring a little bit of, the only way you can kind of sober where we are in this country today. I mean, everyone takes everything so seriously, takes themselves so seriously. And I've always found that humor is kind of the best way to disarm, heavy substance, heavy things, heavy subjects and that type of thing. So I think the more we kind of get away from allowing comedy to breathe, we don't have a way to sort of dive in and really unpack a lot of these things and really kind of test the merits of whether or not this is the way we should be pushing our culture and our country forward. I mean, if you don't have comedians like a George Carlin or a Richard Pryor or a Lenny Bruce, I mean, what would culture look like today without those people? And I'm terrified to think about what it's going to look like in another 2 or 3 years as more and more comedians just go away.
I only got about 30 seconds, but it also exposes the terrible, terrible ideas of, in this case, the woke mob and cancel culture, et cetera, in a beautiful way. It's such an art form.
Well, what I always say when I feel like I hit it out of the park with a joke, what's offensive about the joke or insulting about the joke is often not something I say, but it's an assumption made by the audience. And that's kind of the funny thing about that car crash joke is I don't say who the women are in that joke. You have to assume. And so, you kind of comedy is a great way to show people what's wrong in the way that they think. And I always say, I don't want to tell people what to think, but I want to make them challenge how they think. And without comedy, we can't do that.
JoshDenny.locals.com. Follow MikeSlater.locals.com and JoshDenny.locals.com. I'm glad you're over there too, brother.
I like
Appreciate
it
you,
over
man.
there. It's a great place. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a good day. Yeah, that's true free speech over there at locals.com. JoshDenny.locals.com and MikeSlater.locals.com. All right, again, tomorrow, our special on cancel culture and how to stop it. It's all coming up tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.